What's going on today, everybody? Dog parade just passing through. Today, we're going to talk about The Stand by Stephen King. I have only ever read one Stephen King book before, that being The Dark Tower. What is the first book in The Dark Tower called? I think it's The Gunslinger. If I remember right. It's on the shelf behind me. No. Never mind, I guess it's not there. Book 2's there. I'm going to read that relatively soon, probably, after I finish the Mistborn trilogy. But, in The Gunslinger, I absolutely despised King's writing style. It's extremely symbolic and just kind of frustrating to read. But does that ring true in The Stand? One of the books that is often cited as King's best work. If you don't know, The Stand is a horror plague novel. It is extremely long, FYI. Essentially, there is a virus that sweeps the country, wiping out like 90% of the human population, and we follow a few characters as they all navigate this new world of survivors, which were immune to the disease, which they call the super flu, Captain Trips, all kinds of different names for it depending on where they come from in the country. We follow characters like Harold Lauder, Franny Goldsmith, Larry Underwood, Stu Redman, Glenn Bateman, Nick Andros, that's his last name. We follow quite a few characters, and these characters all find themselves along a very similar path. And what surprised me a little bit is a supernatural element comes into the book, which I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting like a supernatural element. I guess maybe I should have been if I was more familiar with King's work, but I wasn't ready for that. And the basic premise of our plot is people coming together, trying to rebuild in this new world where most people are gone, as well as an overlaying tone of the conflict between good and evil. Hopefully that is enough of a summary to get you interested. Now let's jump into some pros and cons of The Stand. Let's do cons first. Let me see if I can anger a few Stephen King fans by saying, holy crap, the pacing in this book sucked balls. The pacing, I listened to this book on Audible, okay? I listened to a 48-hour book on Audible. Now, I've listened to all of The Wheel of Time on Audible. Big books don't scare me away from listening to them. As a matter of fact, often I prefer long, big books on Audible. But I remember the first few days I was listening to The Stand, I'd listen for a little bit and turn it off. And listen for a little bit and turn it off. Because for like the first 25 hours of this book, I was like, what is all this nonsense? There is so much crap that I don't give a crap about that's included in the beginning of the book. And it felt just like super and overly indulgent writing. I was like, I don't need to know all of this. This isn't relevant to the story. This is entirely too much. This book should have been 30 hours, not 48, okay? The pacing was bad. And then I hit the midpoint. And about the midpoint of the book, that is a good book now. You know? I'm starting to really like this book. But why? Why did it take me like 25 hours of listening? Why? Why is this book so long? And I don't complain about long books. You know why King's right there? That's a long book too. Don't complain about its length. Anyway, that is my biggest con, okay? That is the number one con of this book, is that it is much longer than I felt was necessary, especially in the intro and the opening and the first half of the book. The second half of the book really improves on this, in my opinion. But the first half is like half of the first half is things I didn't care about at all. And that's not a good thing to have in a book. Maybe it was just my taste. Maybe it's just my preference. Maybe if you prefer a slower burn than I do, then this is more your style. And I will say, still, even as the book continues, The Stand is a slow burn. King really, really takes his time with this book. I don't think you could ever call this a page turner. I think the book stays interesting, but it's definitely not a book where you want to get to the next page and see what's going on and can't put it down and you want to read it in one day. I think really my only two other cons would be, again, Stephen King has a strange writing style. Stephen King comes across as a really strange dude to me, and I'm sure you have to be a little bit strange to write horror of the nature, but especially his depictions of sexuality. It's like, dude, what are you doing? Why is this so creepy and weird? Stop with all the sexuality, because it's weird, and I don't think he does it very well. It's just disturbing for the most part. At the same time, I feel like for the nature of the story he is telling, it is appropriate. I think that sexuality 100% has a place within serious stories. Sexuality, sex, rape, all of these things are a very big part of being human. Some good, some terrible, some great. But I think King's depiction of it and the way he describes things just always comes across as creepy and weird to me. I don't like it. I don't really like where you're taking this or how you're handling it. But really it wasn't a huge issue for me in The Stand. There were a couple scenes where it was really strange, kind of disturbing, but for the most part it was whatever. It was just there. And third and final con is the supernatural elements of this book were just, like, they were cool. I don't even know if this is a con. This is more like of a gray area for me. The supernatural elements of this book were cool, but for some reason they never felt like they fit. I don't know. I think that might be more just my expectations for the book. But religious coloring and supernatural overtones of the book just felt slightly out of place for some reason. And it's a huge, huge part of the book. So that doesn't make any sense for it to feel out of place, especially because it's central to the main plotline, and yet it somehow does. Small spoilers, there's occasions where characters have visions that are they have like prophetic visions, and every time it happens it just feels real weird to me. It feels real strange. I'm not sure what that's about. I would love to know what all of you think about that, about the religious overtones of The Stand and how King wrote them and handled them. I thought they were really cool, but they also felt out of place to me. So let me know down below what y'all thought, and maybe provide me some insight as someone who hasn't read a lot of King. I'm sure many of you have, and I'd like to hear what you have to say. Let's jump into some pros. As much as it was a con, I think it's also a pro that this book is a slow burn. As much as for many parts of the book I found the pacing extremely irritating, and I felt that there was a lot of unnecessary information, I also really enjoyed the slow pace and all the time that we got to spend with our characters. and we get to see the characters really interact with each other and just really get to know them pretty well, or get to see who they are really well and get to understand their characters pretty good. Especially, I enjoyed just the relationships between characters. Not necessarily any character individually did I love, except Tom Cullen. Tom Cullen, the great character. But I really liked the interactions between characters. I thought that was great. The book was also sort of, I think, as many books are, but this one in particular, of books that I've read, was really an examination of humanity. And not necessarily one that I agree with, but at least an interesting look at how people think and how the world is. I thought that was pretty cool to see. I really enjoyed, not necessarily enjoyed, but respected the writing of the character for Harold Lauder. As a matter of fact, I thought Harold was a repulsive, weaselly little shit. I think that accurately describes him. But I thought King did an excellent job writing him, giving you an insight into what's going on in his head. And I imagine a character like that probably isn't super easy to write. So I really respect what he did there from a writing standpoint. I think Tom Cullen was handled really well and used in a very interesting way. If you haven't read the book, you'll understand what's unique about Tom Cullen. If you do, and if you have, you probably know what I'm saying. Most of the other characters were less unique than Tom, but I think they were all done really, really well. And I think King did a fantastic job with character work, which is something I've always heard that he does really, really well. And I think, the Stephen King tropes really shine through in this book of not super plot centric, not an amazing plot, but really, really fleshed out and really good characters. And I did think he did a really good job with all of the characters in the book. Another thing that I found really cool was his ability to set tone and put you in the emotional state of the characters you were following and of the situation that you were following. When I followed Harold, I felt repulsed. I like really strong feelings of disgust. Whenever I followed, towards the end of the book, a party was venturing off. Won't say much more about it because it's big spoilers, but I felt their air of reluctant acceptance, I guess you would say. And I thought these were all really cool things, and things that I really enjoyed, and things that I hope when I write I can duplicate how effective he is with tone and putting and conveying the proper emotions and things through writing. One place where it does really buck the trend of Stephen King tropes, though, is I didn't think it had a bad ending. I don't think the ending was controversial either, really. I mean, unless you just really want a super happy, everything goes right, nothing goes wrong, everything goes great for the good guys type of ending, then I guess you might not like the ending that much, because not everything goes right. But I think the ending followed an internally logical and consistent path for the type of story that he is telling. And that is something that I think is super, super important. When the ending makes sense. When you get to the end of a book and you say, yeah, that seems like the only way this could have worked out, or that is one of the ways that I thought this could work out, and that makes a lot of sense to me. I thought the ending was fantastic, especially a small section towards the end where we see three characters, one of them being a dog, all together and traveling. That was my favorite part of this entire book. I loved like the end traveling portion of this story. I thought it was fantastic, and I could have read an entire book like that. I really enjoyed it. The true ending, as everything, there's a bow on it and it's kind of tied up, I also thought made a lot of sense. I enjoyed King's themes that he was projecting onto it. One of that being that there is no end to the struggle, if that makes sense. And it's cool to see something that you have thought yourself put into put in the media and stories. Put in the media. I'm sure lots and lots of people have thought that the struggle never ends. Life always goes on. And that's part of the meaning of it, I guess you would say. That's part of the beauty in it. And I think this book was cool about how it wrapped up. And I think it was great that it's not a fairy tale ending, but it still has enough happiness in it to make you satisfied, if that makes sense at all. So, what did I think of The Stand? I'll give you all my little 1 to 10 scale breakdown of parts of the book. Prose. I actually thought the prose was pretty good out of King. Sometimes his prose can be a bit irritating to me, but I thought it was pretty good for the most part out of this book. Probably 8 out of 10. It didn't shine. I didn't think his prose was amazing like I was reading a Patrick Rothfuss book. But, it wasn't bad either. Probably 8 out of 10, really good. Plot. Struggles with plot a little bit. Plot's probably either 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 for me. Something around those lines. Pacing. Half the book, the pacing was horrible. So the pacing can't get that high of a rating, right? That wouldn't make any sense. If you do terrible on 50% of a test, you're not going to get an A. So pacing is probably a 6 out of 10. I thought the book was way too slow at the beginning, but I did really enjoy the latter half of the book. Characters, I think, was the biggest shining point of the story, and I feel like that is kind of been a trend among the stories I've been reading lately, where plot isn't as centered and characters shine through really well. Characters probably an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, something like that, because I don't think most of the characters themselves in particular were amazing, but it was the interaction between them. It was the group dynamics and how they all worked off each other that I thought was fantastic, and I haven't particularly seen that anywhere else in fiction thus far. Not to this level anyway. And overall, I think I'll give The Stand probably a 7 out of 10. The pacing was just too much for me to give it a higher rating. If we graded the second half of the book exclusively, 8 out of 10 probably, maybe a 9 out of 10, but more leaning towards an 8. But because the first portion of the book I found so infuriating and just frustrating to read through, the book has to be a 7 out of 10. And if you if you want something that is fast-paced, this is for sure not your book. But if you don't mind a slow burn and a really long book that takes a lot of time to get where it's going, then this book is probably for you. So for sure, check it out. I'm going to be reading more Stephen King books. I have right here The Drawing of Three. I've heard this is the best of the Dark Tower series from a lot of people. We'll see as I progress through the Dark Tower series what I think about that. Wasn't a huge fan of the first one, but it was interesting enough to keep me reading. I appreciate all of you for watching. I publish videos every Tuesday. Probably primarily going to be book reviews, but I am looking into publishing some other type of videos in the future. Once again, thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you want to see more of what I do here, subscribe. And let me know what you thought of Stephen King's The Stand in the comments down below. I really enjoy hearing what everybody has to say. That's why I started this channel in the first place, because I wanted to talk about books and stories and just hear other people's thoughts. Peace out, y'all.